Before we dive into today's story, and trust me, you might want to grab a glass of ice water because this one gets intense, do me a huge favor. If you love possessive alphas and romance that keeps you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. It helps the algorithm find more romance lovers like us. Also, I'm curious, where's my pack hiding today? Drop a comment below and tell me what city or country you're listening from. I love seeing how far our territory reaches. All right, are you ready? Let's get into it.
The key stuck in the lock again. I jiggled it, muttering a curse under my breath, my shoulders aching from a 12-hour shift of carrying heavy trays and dodging groping hands at the diner. All I wanted was to take off my shoes, check on Scott, and sleep for 10 hours. Finally, the lock clicked. I pushed the door open, and my world shattered. My apartment, our sanctuary, was gone. It wasn't just robbed, it was obliterated. The sofa was slashed, stuffing bleeding out onto the floor. My small easel, my paints, my canvases, everything I used to escape this life were smashed into kindling. The TV was smashed, the drawers were pulled out, clothes scattered like confetti. "Scott?" I screamed, dropping my bag. "Scott!" Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. My brother was 17, smart and innocent. He was supposed to be home studying. "I'm here, Luce." Scott stepped out of his bedroom. He was pale, shaking, holding a baseball bat that looked comically small in his hands. He wasn't hurt, but his eyes were wide with a terror I had never seen before. "They left," Scott whispered. They said Dad sent them." Dad. The word tasted like bile. Our father, Richard Vance, was a ghost who only appeared when he needed money or a place to hide. I walked into the kitchen. It was trashed, dishes shattered, but on the small, cracked table, there was a single piece of paper. It wasn't a note. It was a ledger. A debt note. It was written on thick, expensive stationery that smelled of cigars and expensive cologne. It listed a sum that made the air leave my lungs. $5 million. At the bottom, scrawled in my father's shaky handwriting, was a message. "I'm sorry. I lost. I told them you would pay." And below that, stamped in red ink, was a sigil I recognized from the whispers in the dark corners of the city. A serpent wrapped around a coin. Alpha Slade, the lone shark of the underworld. "They said," Scott's voice broke behind me, "they said if the debt isn't settled by midnight, they're coming back. They said they're going to take me as payment." I turned around. I looked at my little brother. He was everything good in my life. He was going to college next year. He had a future. My father had gambled that future away on a hand of cards. A cold resolve settled over me, freezing the panic. I wasn't going to let them touch Scott. I wasn't going to let my father win. "Pack a bag," I told Scott, my voice surprisingly steady. "Go to Mrs. Gable's downstairs. Lock the door and do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" Scott asked, gripping my arm. "Lucy, you can't go to Slade. He's a monster. They say he eats people." "I'm going to negotiate," I lied. I grabbed my coat. I didn't have $5 million. I had $40 in tips and a broken heart. But I had one thing left to bargain with. Myself. "I'll be back," I promised. "I'm going to fix this." I walked out of the ruined apartment, leaving my childhood behind, and stepped into the night to sell my soul to the devil. I closed my eyes. I thought of Scott, hiding in the dark. "Fine," I whispered. I'll do it. Good girl. Slade purred. He shoved me into a chair next to him. Deal the cards, he shouted to the dealer, and bring in the big fish. The door opened, and the air in the room changed instantly. It wasn't just a man walking in, it was a storm. The hours between the break-in and midnight were a strange, suffocating limbo. I sent Scott to Mrs. Gable's apartment downstairs. He argued, tears streaming down his face, begging me to let him come with me. I'm the man of the house, Lucy, he cried, gripping the doorframe. I should protect you. You protect me by staying alive, I whispered, kissing his forehead. Please, Scott, just for tonight, be safe. When I locked him in, the silence of the ruined apartment crashed down on me. I sat at the broken kitchen table, staring at the ledger. $5 million. It was an impossible sum. My father hadn't just borrowed money, he had borrowed an empire's ransom. Why? What game was he playing? I looked at the clock. 10:30 p.m. I had 90 minutes. I didn't change my clothes. I was still wearing my diner uniform, a stained white blouse and a black skirt that was slightly too short. I pulled on my worn coat, checked my reflection in the shard of a mirror on the floor, and saw a ghost. My eyes were hollow, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. I looked like exactly what I was, desperate. I walked out into the city. The address on the ledger wasn't a bank. It was the Viper's Den, an exclusive underground club in the meatpacking district. It was a place where the rich went to gamble away fortunes and the poor went to disappear. I walked through the rain, my cheap shoes soaking through. Every step was heavy. I knew what I was doing. I was walking into a cage, but the alternative was Scott's body in a dumpster. I reached the club. The bouncers were massive shifters, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They sneered at my wet clothes. Lost, little lamb? One growled. I'm here to see Alpha Slade, I said, my voice trembling, but clear. Tell him Richard Vance's daughter is here to settle the debt. The bouncer's smirk vanished. He tapped his earpiece, muttered something, and then stepped aside. Go in. Basement level. Don't keep him waiting. I walked down the stairs. The air grew thick with cigar smoke and expensive perfume. The basement wasn't a dungeon. It was a palace of vice. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, illuminating tables of poker, roulette, and blackjack. Men in tailored suits laughed, women in silk dresses draped over them like jewelry. In the center of the room, at the highest stakes table, sat Alpha Slade. He was handsome in a slick, oily way. He wore a white suit that was too bright for the dim room. He was smoking a cigar, looking bored as he raked in a pile of chips. I walked up to the table. The chatter died down. Slade looked up. His eyes were cold, reptilian green. He smiled, revealing teeth that were too white, too sharp. Well, well, Slade drawled. The prodigal daughter returns. I was expecting your father. He's gone, I said, standing tall despite my shaking knees. You know he's gone. That's why you trashed my home. Someone had to send a message, Slade shrugged. Where is my money, Lucy? I don't have it, but I have a proposition. Slade laughed. The sound was dry and cruel. A proposition? Darling, unless you have 5 million in your pocket, you have nothing I want. He stood up and walked around the table. He circled me like a shark. He reached out and touched a lock of my wet hair. Although, he murmured, sniffing the air near my neck, you smell untouched. Rare for a girl in your position. I flinched away. I'm here to work it off. I'll work for you, in the kitchens, cleaning, whatever. Just leave my brother alone. Slade tutted. Kitchens. No, that debt is too big for dishwater. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. But I have investors coming tonight. High rollers. They like entertainment. If you agree to be the prize for the final hand... The prize? I whispered, nausea rolling in my stomach. You sit at the table, you look pretty, and whoever wins the pot wins you, for the night, or maybe longer. I stared at him. He was selling me, like a piece of meat. And the debt? I asked. Cleared, Slade promised. If you agree, Scott is safe. If you walk out that door, my men pay him a visit. I closed my eyes. I thought of Scott hiding in the dark. Fine, I whispered. I'll do it. Good girl, Slade purred. He shoved me into a chair next to him. Deal the cards, he shouted to the dealer, and bring in the big fish. The door opened, and the air in the room changed instantly. It wasn't just a man walking in, it was a storm. The air in the room didn't just change, it evaporated. Every shifter, every gambler, every waitress froze. The heavy, cloying scent of cheap cigars and perfume was instantly obliterated by a new smell. It was sharp, cold, and overwhelmingly powerful. It smelled like ozone, crushed pine, and the terrifying, static charge of a thunderstorm right before the lightning strikes. I couldn't breathe. My wolf, usually dormant and weak from exhaustion, woke up inside my chest. It didn't growl. It whimpered, pressing its belly to the floor of my mind in absolute submission. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was massive, not bulky like the bouncers, but built with the lean, predatory grace of a panther. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my entire life, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders that seemed to block out the rest of the world. His hair was black, swept back from a face that was too harsh to be beautiful, but too striking to look away from. But it was his eyes that pinned me to the chair. They were gold, not hazel, not brown, molten, burning gold. He walked toward the table and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to breathe. Even Alpha Slade, who had been preening a moment ago, stiffened. I saw a bead of sweat roll down Slade's temple. King Jeffrey, Slade said, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared his throat. He stood up, offering a hand that shook. I didn't know you were in the city. To what do I owe the honor? The man, King Jeffrey, ignored the hand. He didn't even look at Slade. His golden gaze was fixed entirely on me. He stopped at the opposite end of the table. Up close, the power radiating off him was a physical weight. It felt like gravity had shifted, pulling everything toward him. I wanted to run, I wanted to hide, but mostly I had the insane, inexplicable urge to bare my neck. Sit, he commanded. He didn't shout. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the floorboards and settled deep in my bones. Slade sat down immediately. I was already frozen in my chair. "I heard there was a game," Jeffrey said, his eyes finally sliding to Slade with the indifference of a lion looking at a rat. "And I heard the buy-in was interesting." "Ah, yes," Slade grinned, regaining some of his composure. He gestured to me with a proprietary wave of his hand. "The girl, a little repayment for a bad debt. She's the putt for the final hand."
Jeffrey looked back at me. His gaze swept over my damp hair, my cheap, stained uniform, and the dark circles under my eyes. I felt stripped naked. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the shivering, but I wasn't cold. I was burning. "Deal the cards," Jeffrey said. He pulled out a chair and sat. He didn't bring chips. He didn't bring cash. He simply placed a heavy platinum watch on the felt table. "I'm in." The dealer's hands shook as he shuffled. The room was deadly silent. The other players folded immediately, terrified to be caught in the crossfire between a loan shark and a king. It was just the two of them. And me. The prize. I stared at the green felt, unable to look at Jeffrey again. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Why was he here? Men like King Jeffrey Blackwood didn't visit underground basements. They ruled empires from glass towers. 5-card draw, Slade announced, his greed warring with his fear. The winner takes all, the money and the girl. Jeffrey didn't speak. He just watched me. I could feel his gaze on my skin, heavier than a touch. It was possessive, calculating. The game was a blur. I didn't know poker, but I knew tension. Slade was sweating profusely now, his eyes darting between his cards and the pile of chips in the center. Jeffrey hadn't looked at his cards once. He sat perfectly still, his large hands resting on the table, completely relaxed. "I raise," Slade said, his voice tight. He pushed his entire stack forward. "All in." He looked at Jeffrey, a smug grin stretching his thin lips. "I have a full house, Your Majesty, unless you can beat that." Jeffrey didn't blink. He didn't move to check his hand. Slade, emboldened by the king's silence, leaned over and draped his arm around the back of my chair. His fingers trailed down my shoulder, brushing the bare skin of my neck. "Looks like you're staying with me, sweetheart," Slade whispered, his breath hot and smelling of stale tobacco. "I have so many ideas for you." Crack. The sound was like a gunshot. Before I could even blink, Jeffrey was across the table. He moved faster than my eyes could track. One moment he was sitting, the next he was standing over Slade. He had grabbed Slade's wrist, the one touching me, and twisted it backward at an unnatural angle. Slade screamed, a high-pitched, wailing sound that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. "Do not," Jeffrey said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "touch what is mine." The room erupted into chaos. Bouncers surged forward, but Jeffrey simply turned his head and growled. It wasn't a human sound. It was the roar of an alpha beast. It hit the bouncers like a physical wall, forcing them to their knees, their wolves cowing in submission. Jeffrey looked down at Slade, who was whimpering on the floor, clutching his broken wrist. "The game is over." He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a checkbook. He uncapped a fountain pen, scribbled something, and tore the page out. He let it flutter down onto Slade's heaving chest. "My debt was 5 million," I whispered, my voice trembling. "That is for 50 million," Jeffrey said, not looking at me. He was staring at Slade with cold, lethal promise. "Consider it a severance package. You are selling her debt to me. All of it. And if you ever come near her, or her brother, again, I will not break your wrist. I will tear out your throat." Slade nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Alpha. She's yours. Take her." Jeffrey turned to me. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by that intense, unreadable mask. He held out a hand. His palm was large, calloused, and steady. "Get up, Lucy," he said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. I looked at his hand, then at the door. I looked at Slade, broken on the floor. I realized with a jolt that I had just been traded. I wasn't free. I had just been bought by a much bigger, much more dangerous predator. But when I looked into Jeffrey's golden eyes, I didn't see the sleazy hunger I saw in Slade. I saw something ancient, something that made my knees weak and my breath hitch. I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine, engulfing my hand completely. His skin was scorching hot. A jolt of electricity shot up my arm, making me gasp. "Good girl," he murmured. He pulled me to his side, tucking me against his hard body as if I belonged there, as if I had always belonged there. "Walk," he commanded. And he led me out of hell. The ride was silent. He put me in the back of a black SUV that looked more like a tank than a car. The leather seats were soft, enveloping my exhausted body. The interior smelled like him, cedar, rain, and that dark, spicy musk that made my head spin. Jeffrey sat next to me, typing on a phone. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me, but he kept his hand on his thigh, inches from mine. The heat radiating off him was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. We drove out of the slums, past the neon lights of the city, and up toward the skyline. The car stopped in front of the Blackwood Tower. It was a needle of glass and steel piercing the clouds, the tallest building in the city. He escorted me through a private entrance, bypassing the lobby. The elevator ride was dizzying. My ears popped as we ascended, the numbers on the display climbing higher and higher until they stopped at the very top. Penthouse. The doors slid open. I stepped out into a fortress of glass. The apartment was massive. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the entire city. The furniture was sleek, modern, and dark. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It looked like a museum, not a home. "Scott," I said, the reality of the situation finally crashing down on me. I turned to Jeffrey. "My brother. He's at Mrs. Gable's. I have to—" "Your brother is safe," Jeffrey said. He took off his suit jacket and tossed it onto a leather chair. Beneath the jacket, he wore a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal thick forearms corded with muscle. I swallowed hard. You sent guards?" "I protect my investments," he said simply. He walked over to a wet bar and poured a glass of amber liquid. He didn't offer me any. He took a sip, his golden eyes tracking my every movement as I stood awkwardly in the center of the vast room. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small. I owe you $50 million. I can't pay that. Not in 10 lifetimes. Jeffrey set the glass down. He walked toward me, his steps silent on the marble floor. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of me, towering over my small frame. He reached out and tilted my chin up with his thumb. The touch was gentle, but firm. My heart stopped. Then, how? He said softly, "You pay me with your life." The words were heavy, absolute. Slade owned your debt. Now I own it, which means I own your time. I own your schedule. I own where you sleep, what you eat, and who you speak to. I tried to pull away, panic flaring, but his grip on my chin tightened just enough to hold me in place. "I am not Slade," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated in my chest. "I do not want a whore. I do not force women into my bed." "Then what do you want?" I whispered. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath, mixed with his intoxicating scent. "I want your submission. I want you to give me everything, not because you have to, but because you want to." He let go of my chin and stepped back. "You are not a slave here, Lucy. But make no mistake, you are mine." He turned and walked toward a hallway. "The guest room is the second door on the left. There are clothes in the closet. Shower, sleep. We begin tomorrow." He left me standing there trembling in the middle of his sky citadel, terrified and exhilarated all at once. I was a prisoner in a golden cage, and God help me, I didn't want to leave. I woke up in a bed that cost more than my father's insurance policy. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, cool and impossibly soft against my skin. For a moment, suspended in the haze of sleep, I forgot. I reached out, expecting to feel the lumpy mattress of my tiny apartment, expecting to hear the sound of Scott typing on his computer in the next room. Instead, I touched vast, empty space. Memory rushed back like a slap to the face. The debt, the club, the king. I sat up, my heart hammering. I was in the guest room of the Sky Citadel. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, blindingly bright. I looked down at myself. I was still wearing the oversized t-shirt I had found in the closet last night. I felt small, insignificant. A knock sounded at the door. It wasn't a question, it was a notification. "Enter," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. The door opened, and King Jeffrey walked in. He was dressed immaculately, in a crisp white dress shirt and dark trousers, but he looked feral. His sleeves were rolled up, exposing those thick, corded forearms, and his hair was slightly damp. He carried a silver tray. The smell hit me before he even reached the bed. Bacon, eggs, freshly baked bread, coffee. My stomach let out a treacherous, audible growl. I clamped a hand over it, burning with humiliation. I hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days. I usually gave the good food to Scott and ate the scraps from the diner. Jeffrey set the tray down on the bedside table. His golden eyes swept over me, analyzing, calculating. He frowned. "You are too thin," he stated. His voice was deep, devoid of judgment, but heavy with displeasure. I can see your collarbones from the doorway. I'm fine, I lied, pulling the sheet up to my chin. I'm naturally small. Jeffrey set the tray down on the bedside table. His golden eyes swept over me, analyzing, calculating. He frowned. You are too thin, he stated. His voice was deep, devoid of judgment, but heavy with displeasure. I can see your collarbones from the doorway. I'm fine, I lied, pulling the sheet up to my chin. I'm naturally small. You are malnourished, he corrected. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipped under his weight, pulling me slightly toward him. Sit up, eat. I stared at the food. It looked like heaven, but pride, my last shred of defense, flared up. I'm not hungry, I said, lifting my chin, and I'm not a child. You don't need to. Jeffrey didn't let me finish. He picked up the fork, speared a piece of fluffy scrambled egg and bacon, and held it to my lips. I didn't ask if you were hungry, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Open. I pressed my lips together. No. His eyes narrowed. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with that static electricity I had felt at the club. Lucy, do not fight me on this. You need strength if you are going to survive living with me. Survive? I squeaked. Open. He repeated. My will crumbled. It wasn't just fear. It was the smell of the food and the sheer, overwhelming force of his presence. I parted my lips. He slid the fork in. The taste was an explosion of flavor. Salty, buttery perfection. I moaned involuntarily as I chewed. Jeffrey watched my mouth, his gaze darkening. He didn't look away. He fed me the next bite, and the next. It was humiliating. It was intimate. Having the alpha king of the city hand feed me like a wounded bird made my skin prickle with heat. But there was something else, too. Care. No one had taken care of me since my mother died. I was always the one working, the one saving, the one feeding. To have someone else take the burden, even forcibly, it made tears prick my eyes. Good girl, he murmured as I finished the plate. He reached out, his thumb brushing a crumb from my lower lip. His touch was electric, searing a path straight to my core. We have much to do today. But first, you smell like that place. His face hardened. You smell like him. I showered last night, I argued, clutching the sheet tighter. The soap in the guest bathroom is generic, Jeffrey said. Standing up, he towered over me, blotting out the sun. The scent of the viper's den, stale smoke, fear, and that greaseball Slade. It clings. It's in your hair. It's on your skin. He wrinkled his nose, his upper lip curling in a snarl that revealed a flash of white teeth. To a wolf, scent was identity, and apparently, my identity currently smelled like a cheap casino. Go to the master bathroom, he commanded. I have drawn a bath for you. I can wash myself, I said, scrambling out of bed on the opposite side. I didn't say you couldn't, he replied calmly, but I am going to ensure it is done right. I froze. You're watching? I am supervising. I walked into the master bathroom with trembling legs. It was a palace of marble and black stone. In the center sat a tub large enough to fit 4 people.
filled with steaming water that smelled of sandalwood and bergamot. Jeffrey followed me in. He leaned against the vanity, crossing his arms. "Get in." "Turn around," I demanded, my face burning. He stared at me for a long beat. Then, surprisingly, he turned his back. "You have 10 seconds." I dropped the t-shirt and scrambled into the water, sinking until the bubbles covered me to my chin. "Okay." Jeffrey turned back around. He walked over to the tub, picked up a large sea sponge, and knelt on the cold tiles beside me. He didn't look lecherous. He looked focused, intense. "Give me your arm," he said. I hesitated, then lifted my wet arm from the water. He took my wrist. His hand was massive, his fingers wrapping completely around my forearm. The contrast, my pale, wet skin against his tanned, scarred hand, was striking. He began to scrub. He wasn't gentle, but he wasn't rough. He was thorough. He scrubbed away the invisible grime of the last few years. He washed my arm, my shoulder, my neck. "You carry too much tension," he murmured, his fingers digging into the tight muscle of my shoulder. "You are safe here, Lucy. Slade cannot touch you. The debt is gone." "Why?" I whispered, looking at his profile. He was devastatingly handsome this close up, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. "Why did you pay it?" He paused. He looked at me, his golden eyes softening just a fraction. He reached up and tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear. "Because," he said, his voice rough, "I knew the moment I walked into that room that you didn't belong there, and I hate wasted potential." He moved the sponge to my chest, just above the waterline. I held my breath. He didn't go lower. He respected the boundary, but the proximity was suffocating. I could smell him, clean, masculine, powerful. It was intoxicating. "Rinse," he ordered, pulling back. He picked up a pitcher and poured warm water over my head. I closed my eyes, the water cascading down my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel dirty. I didn't feel used. I felt cherished. "Better," he grunted, inhaling deeply near my neck. "Now you smell like mine." After the bath, I expected to be given my old clothes back. Instead, I found a garment bag hanging on the door of the guest room. Inside were clothes that looked simple but felt expensive. Soft leggings, oversized cashmere sweaters, thick wool socks. There were no heels, no short skirts, no waitress aprons. They were clothes meant for comfort, for hiding. I dressed in a cream-colored sweater that fell to my mid-thigh and walked out into the living room. Jeffrey was sitting at a massive mahogany desk, reviewing documents. He looked up as I entered, his eyes tracking me. He nodded, satisfied. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. The sweater was the softest thing I had ever worn. "But I need to go to work. My shift starts at 4. Jeffrey didn't even look up from his papers. "You quit." "Excuse me?" I bristled. "I didn't quit. I need that job. I have bills. I paid your bills." He cut in. He slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." I walked over and opened the folder. Inside was a receipt. He had paid the rent on my destroyed apartment for the next year. He had paid off the medical bills from when Scott broke his leg 2 years ago. He had even paid the overdue electric bill. "You don't work at the diner anymore,"
Jeffrey said, his tone final. You don't serve greasy food to ungrateful men who stare at your legs. Your job is here. Doing what? I asked, frustration bubbling up. Sitting around? Being your pet? Jeffrey stood up. He moved around the desk with that predatory grace that always made my breath hitch. Your job, he said, stopping in front of me, is to heal. Your job is to sleep 8 hours a night. Your job is to eat 3 meals a day. Your job is to stop looking over your shoulder, waiting for the world to crush you. I can't just do nothing, I argued, though my voice wavered. I need control. I need to know what the rules are. You want rules? Jeffrey stepped closer. Fine. Rule 1, you do not leave this penthouse without me. Rule 2, you eat what I give you. Rule 3, you sleep when I tell you to sleep. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the back of the sofa, trapping me between the furniture and his body. And Rule 4, he whispered, his breath fanning across my lips. You do not hide from me. If you are scared, you tell me. If you are hurting, you tell me. If you want something, you ask. I stared up at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. I had spent my entire life fighting to survive, making every hard decision alone. The idea of letting go, of letting someone else take the wheel, it was terrifying. But as I looked into his fierce, golden eyes, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized was crushing me. Okay, I whispered. Good. Now, come here. We need to fix your hair. By evening, the tension in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. We were sitting on the plush, leather sofa. Jeffrey had put on a movie, something quiet and classical, but neither of us was watching it. I was curled up in the corner, reading a book from his library. Jeffrey was reading on a tablet, but he hadn't scrolled in 10 minutes. Every time I moved, his head snapped toward me. Every time I sighed, his nostrils flared. The air around him was vibrating. It was the wolf. I knew about shifters, of course. Everyone did. But I had never been this close to an alpha in his own territory. His presence was overwhelming. It felt like standing next to a nuclear reactor. You're pacing, I said softly, though he was sitting still. Inside, Jeffrey looked at me. His eyes were glowing brighter than usual, the gold consuming the white. He looked tortured. My wolf is agitated, he admitted, his voice a low growl. Why? He laughed, a dark, humorless sound. Because you are here, because you are safe, and because you still don't smell right. He closed the distance between us. He didn't walk, he prowled. He sat next to me on the sofa, his thigh pressing against mine. The heat radiating from him burned through my leggings. May I? He asked. It was a command wrapped in a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Jeffrey leaned in. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, right where my pulse was fluttering like a trapped moth. He inhaled, deeply, loudly. Soap, he muttered against my skin. And fear. And sweetness. He began to nuzzle me. It wasn't a kiss. It was rougher, primal. He rubbed his cheek against my jaw, his nose along my hairline. He was scent marking me, rubbing his scent glands against my skin to mask everything else, to claim me as his territory. It should have been terrifying. A 250-pound lethal predator was pressing his teeth against my jugular. But it wasn't fear I felt. It was a sudden, molten heat pooling in my stomach. My body reacted instinctively. I tilted my head back, baring my throat to him. A low rumble started in Jeffrey's chest, vibrating against my side. Purring. The Alpha King was purring. Mine, he groaned, the word vibrating against my skin. You smell like mine now. He pulled back, his eyes blown wide, pupils dilated until only a ring of gold remained. He looked like he wanted to devour me. Go to bed, Lucy, he said hoarsely, pulling away as if burned. Go to your room. Lock the door. Jeffrey? I reached out. Go, he snarled, his hands gripping the leather of the sofa so hard I heard it crack. Before I forget that I promised not to touch you. I scrambled off the sofa and ran to the guest room. I locked the door, leaning against it, gasping for breath. My hand flew to my neck where the ghost of his stubble still tingled. I wasn't scared of him hurting me. I was scared because for a fleeting, insane moment, I had wanted him to bite. The dream was always the same. I was back in the apartment. The door was splintering under the force of a battering ram. But it wasn't the police. It was Slade. He was 10 feet tall, his skin made of scales, his mouth a gaping maw filled with rows of shark teeth. He wasn't looking for money. He was holding Scott by the throat. Pay the debt, Lucy. Pay with flesh. I screamed, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but the floor turned to tar. Slade laughed, his claws tightening around my brother's neck. No! I woke up thrashing, my lungs heaving, my skin drenched in a cold sweat. The darkness of the room felt heavy, suffocating. I scrambled backward, hitting the headboard, pulling my knees to my chest. The door flew open. There was no light in the hallway, just a massive silhouette filling the frame. King Jeffrey. Lucy? His voice was rough with sleep, but laced with instant alertness. He didn't wait for an answer. He crossed the room in 2 strides. I expected him to be angry that I woke him. I flinched as he reached out. But he didn't strike. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled me into his arms. Shh, he rumbled, his hand cradling the back of my head, pressing my face into his chest. I've got you. You're safe. You're in the Citadel. I was shaking so hard, my teeth chattered. I couldn't stop the tears. The terror of the last week, the debt, the threats, the complete upheaval of my life poured out of me. He had Scott. He was going to kill him. He will never touch Scott, he promised, his voice vibrating through my cheek. I broke his wrist. I bought his silence. You are under my protection now. I clung to him. I dug my fingers into his shoulders, needing to feel the solidity of him. I had been alone for so long. I had been the strong one, the protector, the rock. I had forgotten what it felt like to be held. I was starving for it. Don't let go, I whispered, my voice breaking. Jeffrey stiffened for a second, his muscles bunching under my hands. Then he let out a long, ragged breath and wrapped his arms tighter around me. He pulled me into his lap, rocking me slowly. I have you, he murmured, his lips brushing the top of my head. I'm not going anywhere. We sat like that for an hour. The Alpha King, who could crush steel with his hands, holding a waitress who had nothing left to give. And as my breathing slowed, the fear began to recede, replaced by something warm and dangerous. I could feel his heart beating, slow, powerful, steady. I could smell the sleep-warm scent of cedar and rain on his skin. I realized I was sitting between his spread thighs, my body molded to his. I didn't move away. I snuggled closer. "Better?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I whispered. He didn't push me away. He stayed until I fell back asleep, his presence chasing the monsters back into the dark. The peace didn't last. 2 days later, panic set in again. I hadn't spoken to Scott since the night at the club. Jeffrey said he was safe, but I needed to hear his voice. Jeffrey had gone to a meeting, leaving his personal tablet on the kitchen island. I knew the rule. Rule 1, you trust me. Rule 4, you ask. But old habits died hard. I snatched the tablet, guessed the passcode, 1111, surprisingly simple for a genius, and dialed Scott's number. "Hello?" Scott's voice was tinny. "Scott, it's me," I whispered, hunching over the counter. "Are you okay? Is Mrs. Gable feeding you?" Lucy? Yeah, I'm fine." Scott sounded confused. "Some guys in suits brought groceries. They said they work for your new boss. Are you okay? When are you coming home?" I don't know yet. Just stay inside, okay?" The front door beeped. My blood ran cold. I slammed the tablet down, ending the call. But it was too late. Jeffrey stood in the entryway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was loosened, and his face was a mask of thunderous calm. He didn't shout. He walked over to the island, picked up the tablet, and looked at the call log. "I told you he was safe," Jeffrey said. His voice was quiet, deadly. "I just wanted to hear his voice," I stammered, backing away until my hips hit the counter. "You broke a rule," he said, stepping into my personal space. "You went behind my back. You didn't trust me." "I was worried." "And now I am worried, because if you cannot follow simple commands inside this house, how can I trust you outside of it?" He stared down at me, his golden eyes burning. "You need to learn, Lucy. Actions have consequences." "Are you going to hit me?" I challenged, though my voice shook. His eyes flashed with offense. "I am not an animal. I do not strike what is mine. But I will make you understand who is in control." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk tie. "Turn around." I hesitated. "Turn around." The Alpha command slammed into me, making my knees weak. I turned, placing my hands on the cool marble. He blindfolded me. The world went dark. My other senses spiked. I heard his breathing, felt the heat of his body behind me. "Stand still," he whispered in my ear. "Do not move. Do not speak. If you move, I stop touching you." I shivered, That was the punishment? Then he began. He ran his hands down my arms, slowly, maddeningly light. He traced the curve of my spine with a single finger. I gasped, arching into the touch. "Don't move." He scolded softly. He stepped back. I stood in the darkness, waiting. The anticipation was agony. I didn't know where he would touch me next. He blew cool air on the back of my neck. I shuddered. He trailed his knuckles down the side of my thigh. I whimpered. He pressed his body flush against my back, his arousal hard and heavy against my round buttocks. But he didn't do anything. He just held me there, suspended in darkness and desire. "You belong to me," he whispered into my neck. "Your pleasure is mine to give. Your fear is mine to soothe. Do you understand?" My body was on fire. I needed him to touch me more. I needed friction. I needed release. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, Jeffrey." He ripped the blindfold off. The light blinded me. He was staring at me, his chest heaving. "Good," he rasped. "Now go get dressed. We have a gala to attend." The dress was a weapon. It was emerald green silk, backless with a slit that went up to my hip. It clung to every curve, spilling down like liquid metal. Jeffrey had chosen it. When I walked out of the bedroom, Jeffrey was waiting by the door. He was in a tuxedo, looking like James Bond, if James Bond was also a werewolf king. He stopped adjusting his cufflinks when he saw me. He went completely still. His gaze raked over me, hot and possessive. "Turn around," he ordered. I spun slowly. "Too much skin," he growled. Though he didn't look like he wanted me to cover up. He looked like he wanted to murder anyone else who saw me. "You bought it," I reminded him. "A mistake," he muttered, walking over. He placed a diamond necklace around my throat. The cool metal felt like a collar. "Stay close to me tonight, Lucy. The pack elders will be there. They will smell you on me." The gala was held in a massive ballroom in the city center. As soon as we walked in, the noise died. Hundreds of eyes turned to us. I felt small, like an imposter. I was a waitress in a $5,000 dress. I instinctively tried to step behind Jeffrey. He wouldn't let me. He placed his hand on the small of my back, skin on skin, his thumb rubbing soothing circles against my spine. He pulled me to his side, forcing me to walk beside him, not behind him. "Chin up," he whispered. "You are with the king. You bow to no one." We moved through the crowd. People parted for him, offering bows and murmuring titles, but their eyes were on me, assessing, judging. "Who is she?" I heard a woman whisper. "A human?" "She smells like him," a man replied. "Look at his hand." Jeffrey didn't remove his hand all night. When he introduced me to business partners, he introduced me as Lucy, with no explanation, no title, just the name, spoken with a reverence that shut down any questions. We danced. He held me close, one hand clasping mine, the other splayed wide on my bare back. We moved perfectly together, despite my lack of training. He led, I followed.
You're tense, he noted, spinning me. Everyone is staring, I said. They know I don't belong here. Jeffrey stopped in the middle of the floor. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear.
Let them stare, he said, his voice a low vibration that went straight to my core. Let them see that the most valuable thing in this room isn't the diamonds or the deals, it's you. I looked up at him, breathless. The night was going perfectly until she appeared. We were near the champagne fountain when a woman approached. She was stunning, tall, blonde, with predatory blue eyes, and a dress that was barely legal. She moved with the fluid grace of a born shifter. "Jeffrey," she purred, stepping into his path. She ignored me completely. "It's been too long. The pack has missed you at the hunts." Jeffrey's expression didn't change, but the hand on my back tightened. "Vanessa," he acknowledged coolly. "I have been busy." "Clearly," she laughed, her eyes finally flicking to me. It was a look of pure disdain. "Playing with your food, I see. Cute little human. Does she do tricks?" Rage, hot and sudden, flared in my chest. I opened my mouth to snap back, but Jeffrey beat me to it. He didn't shout. He didn't growl. He simply looked at her with an expression of utter boredom. "Careful, Vanessa," he said softly. "You are speaking about my companion." "Companion," Vanessa scoffed, stepping closer and placing a hand on Jeffrey's bicep. "Oh, Jeffrey, you need a queen, not a pet. You need someone who can run with you, someone who can take a knot." The vulgarity hung in the air. I felt a pang of insecurity. She was right. She was strong, beautiful, a wolf. I was just Lucy. Jeffrey looked at her hand on his arm. Then he looked at her face. "Remove your hand," he said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Before I remove it for you." Vanessa froze. Her smile faltered. "I have no interest in you, Vanessa." Jeffrey continued, his voice carrying the weight of alpha command. "I never have. And if you ever disrespect her again, you will find yourself exiled from this territory by sunrise." He turned his back on her. He grabbed my face in both hands, forcing me to look at him. "Do not listen to her," he commanded, his eyes searching mine. "She is noise. You are the music." "She's a wolf," I whispered, the jealousy burning my throat. "She's your equal." "She is nothing," Jeffrey growled. "She wants my power. She wants the title." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine in the middle of the crowded ballroom. "You are the only one who sees me," he whispered. "You are the only one I want to run with." My heart stuttered. The jealousy vanished, replaced by a triumphant thrill. He didn't just defend me, he claimed me. "Take me home," I whispered, clutching his lapels. Jeffrey's eyes darkened. "Gladly." The elevator ride up to the penthouse was silent, but the air was screaming. Jeffrey didn't touch me. He stood in the corner of the small metal box, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his chest heaving with controlled breaths. His scent was overwhelming, spicy, dark, and thick with arousal. It filled my lungs, making my head spin. When the doors slid open, he didn't wait. "Bedroom," he growled. I didn't argue. I walked toward the master suite, my heels clicking on the marble, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I heard him lock the front door, a heavy, mechanical thud that sealed us in. I reached the center of the room and turned around. Jeffrey was there. He looked at me like a starving man looks at a feast. The cool, collected king was gone. In his place was the alpha. "Take it off," he commanded. My hands shook as I reached for the clasp of the diamond necklace. It came undone, pooling like cold water in my hands before I dropped it to the floor. Then I reached for the zipper at the lower back of my dress. It stuck. I can't," I whispered. Jeffrey was there in a heartbeat. He spun me around. I felt his large, hot hands on my bare back. He didn't unzip it gently. He ripped the zipper down. The sound of tearing fabric filled the room. The green silk pooled at my feet. I stood in nothing but my lace panties and heels. I heard him inhale sharply. "Beautiful," he groaned. He picked me up, lifted me as if I weighed nothing, and carried me to the bed. He tossed me onto the mattress, following me down instantly. His weight was a heavy, comforting blanket. He caged me in with his arms, his golden eyes burning into mine. "You wanted to know who you belong to?" he murmured, his voice rough. He lowered his head, trailing hot, wet kisses down my throat, over my collarbone. "Let me show you." He didn't kiss my lips. He went lower. His mouth found the peak of my breast, sucking hard through the thin lace of my bra before ripping that away too. "Jeffrey," I gasped, arching my back. "Please, please, what?" he taunted, his hand sliding down my stomach, slipping beneath the waistband of my panties. "Please, stop?" "No," I cried out as his fingers found me. I was slick, ready for him. "Please, I need you." He worked me with a rhythm that made my vision blur. He was relentless, finding every nerve ending, every sensitive spot. I was unraveling, my hands gripping his hair, my hips bucking against his hand. "Jeffrey, please," I begged, needing him inside me. "Now, I need you inside." He stopped. I opened my eyes, panting, confused. He was hovering over me, sweat beading on his forehead, his pupils blown wide. He looked like he was in physical pain from restraining himself. "No," he rasped. "What?" I whimpered. "Why?" "Because you are not just a body to me," he said, his voice fierce. He withdrew his hand and kissed my forehead, then my nose. "And I won't take you until you really know that this isn't payment. This isn't a debt." He moved back down, spreading my legs wide with his shoulders. "You have to beg for it, Lucy. Not because you owe me, but because you can't live without it." And then his mouth replaced his hand, and he shattered me completely. The room was dark, lit only by the city lights filtering through the sheer curtains. I lay tangled in the sheets, my body humming with the aftershocks of a pleasure so intense it felt like a little death. Jeffrey lay beside me, on top of the covers, fully clothed except for his jacket and tie. He had unraveled me, put me back together, and held me while I cried from the sheer release of it. And he hadn't taken his own pleasure. He had given everything to me. I turned my head to look at him. His eyes were closed, his breathing deep and even. He looked younger when he slept, less like a king, more like a man. "Jeffrey," I whispered. His eyes snapped open, instant gold. "Lucy?" "Why didn't you—" I gestured vaguely. "Finish." He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. He reached out and traced the line of my jaw with a calloused thumb. He said softly, "I told you, I don't take. I wait to be given." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the loneliness behind the power. I saw the man who had spent his life protecting everyone else, controlling everything, never allowing himself to be vulnerable. The last brick of my wall crumbled. I sat up, the sheet falling to my waist. I didn't feel shy anymore. I reached out and placed my hand on his chest, right over his beating heart. "I'm not paying a debt," I said, my voice steady. Jeffrey went still. "Jeffrey? I'm not here because of the money. I'm not here because of Slade. I'm here because—" I took a breath. "Because I feel safe with you. Because you see me." I leaned in, pressing my lips to his. It was a soft, chaste kiss, but it held more power than anything we had done earlier. "I am yours, Jeffrey," I whispered against his mouth. "Not because you bought me, but because I choose you." A low, guttural sound broke from his throat. He grabbed the back of my neck and pulled me down, kissing me with a desperation that stole my breath. It wasn't the kiss of a master claiming a slave. It was the kiss of a drowning man finding air. "Mine," he growled into my mouth. "My mate. My queen." He pulled me down onto his chest, wrapping his arms around me so tight I could barely breathe. "Sleep," he commanded, his voice thick with emotion. "Tomorrow I burn the ledger. Tomorrow you are free." I closed my eyes, listening to his heartbeat. I was free, but I was never leaving. For 3 days, we lived in a bubble. He didn't go into the office. We stayed in the penthouse. He cooked for me. We read. We talked. He showed me the studio he had built in the East Wing, a room filled with easels, paints, and the best natural light in the city. Paint, he had said. Paint whatever you want. I was standing there now, a brush in my hand, staring at a canvas that was finally starting to look like something other than mud. I was painting him. Not the king in the suit, but the man with the messy hair who made me coffee. My phone buzzed on the stool behind me. I smiled, thinking it was Jeffrey checking in from the other room. He was obsessed with messaging me even when he was 50 feet away. I picked it up. It wasn't a text. It was a picture message from an unknown number. My smile died. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. The paintbrush slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor, splattering red paint like blood. The photo was grainy, taken in a dark room. It showed a boy tied to a chair. His face was bruised, his lips split. He looked terrified. Scott. Below the photo was a text. The debt isn't settled until I say it is. Come to the old shipyard, warehouse 4, alone. If you tell the king, the boy dies. You have 1 hour. The world tilted. Slade. He had Scott. He had somehow gotten past Mrs. Gable, past the security, past Jeffrey's protection. Panic, primal and screaming, clawed at my throat. Run, my brain screamed. Go save him. Do what he says. Don't let Scott die. I grabbed my bag. I ran toward the elevator. My hand hovered over the button. If you tell the king, the boy dies. I could see the elevator numbers counting down. I could leave right now. I could trade myself for Scott again. That's what I did. I sacrificed. I handled it alone. But then I heard Jeffrey's voice in my head. Rule 4. You do not hide from me. You trust me. I froze. If I went alone, Slade would kill us both. I knew that now. He didn't want money. He wanted to hurt Jeffrey by breaking me. I pulled my hand back, I turned around, and I ran toward Jeffrey's office. I burst into his office without knocking. Jeffrey was on a video conference call with what looked like the Japanese Prime Minister. He looked up, annoyed at the intrusion, until he saw my face. He ended the call instantly, slammed the laptop shut. Lucy? He was around the desk in a second. What is it? Are you hurt? I couldn't speak. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I held out the phone. Jeffrey took it. He looked at the screen. The change in him was terrifying. The air in the room temperature dropped. The windows rattled. A low, subsonic growl started in his chest, so deep it hurt my ears. His eyes didn't just flash gold, they went black. Slade, he whispered. The name sounded like a curse. He looked at me. His face was a mask of violence, but his eyes were searching mine. You didn't go, he said. It wasn't a question. He said come alone, I sobbed. He said he'd kill him if I told you. But you told me. I promised, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I promised I was yours. I promised I wouldn't hide. Jeffrey dropped the phone on the desk. He grabbed me, pulling me into his chest. He held me so tight my ribs creaked. You did good, he growled into my hair. You did perfect, Lucy. Because you stayed, Scott is going to live. He pulled back, his hands gripping my shoulders. If you had gone alone, he would have killed you both. But now... A cruel, predatory smile twisted his lips. It was the monster I had seen in the poker room, but magnified by 1,000. Now, he has invited war. He tapped his earpiece. Security. Code Red. Prepare the SUV, get the tactical team, and get the torture specialist. He looked at me.
Are you coming? I wiped my tears. I thought of Scott, bruised and bleeding. I thought of Slade threatening my family. Yes, I said, my voice hardening. I want to see him burn. Jeffrey nodded. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a heavy black pistol. He handed it to me.
Then, let's go get our brother. The shipyard smelled of rust, dead fish, and impending death. Rain lashed against the windshield of the armored SUV as we tore through the chain-link fence, not slowing down for a second. Jeffrey was behind the wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes glowing a steady, furious gold. He hadn't spoken since we left the tower. He was no longer the businessman in the suit. He was pure predator, vibrating with a lethal energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Stay in the car," Jeffrey commanded as we skidded to a halt in front of Warehouse 4. "No," I said, gripping the heavy pistol he'd given me. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "He's my brother."
Jeffrey looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded once, a sharp military jerk of his chin. "Then stay behind me. If anything moves and it isn't me or Scott, shoot it." He kicked the door open. We didn't sneak in. Jeffrey walked toward the metal sliding doors and simply ripped one off its tracks with a screech of tearing metal that sounded like a banshee's scream. We stepped into the gloom. The warehouse was cavernous, lit by flickering halogen bulbs. In the center, tied to a chair under a spotlight, was Scott. He was conscious, his face swollen, blood dripping from his nose. Standing behind him was Slade, holding a knife to Scott's throat. A dozen hired thugs surrounded them, holding bats and chains. "You brought company," Slade sneered, though his voice wavered when he saw Jeffrey. "You told me to come alone, bitch." "She is not alone." Jeffrey's voice boomed. It wasn't human. It was amplified by the growl of his wolf, echoing off the steel beams. "She is never alone." "One step closer and the kid bleeds," Slade yelled, pressing the knife into Scott's skin. A thin line of red appeared. That was the mistake. Jeffrey didn't step. He blurred. It was an explosion of violence. Jeffrey moved faster than the eye could track. He launched himself at the nearest thug, catching a swinging bat with one hand and snapping the man's arm with the other. The warehouse erupted. I ran towards Scott. A thug lunged at me from the shadows, a knife glinting. I didn't think. I raised the gun and fired. The recoil jarred my shoulder. The bullet hit his leg, and he went down screaming. I reached Scott. "I've got you," I gasped, fumbling with the ropes. "I'm here." Scott wept, his eyes wide. "Look out." I turned. Slade had abandoned Scott and was backing away, but he saw me. He lunged, knife raised, but he never reached me. A shadow fell over us. Jeffrey was there. He was covered in blood that wasn't his shirt shredded, his chest heaving. He caught Slade's wrist in mid-air. Jeffrey didn't look like a man anymore. His canines were fully extended, his claws inch-long daggers. He looked like a nightmare. "You threatened my mate. You touched my pack." Jeffrey twisted Slade's arm, the bone shattering with a wet crunch. Slade screamed, dropping the knife. Jeffrey grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground as if he were a chicken. "Now," Jeffrey growled, his golden eyes burning into Slade's terrified soul. "You pay the debt." The silence that followed was deafening. The thugs were either unconscious or groaning on the floor. The rain hammered on the tin roof, a rhythmic drumbeat to the violence. Jeffrey held Slade suspended in the air. The lone shark kicked feebly, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging. "Please," Slade wheezed, I have money. I can pay.
I have more money than God, Jeffrey snarled, tightening his grip. And you have nothing I want, except your absence. I watched, frozen. I should have been horrified. I should have looked away. But I didn't. This man had tormented my family for years. He had destroyed my home. He had hurt Scott. I looked at Jeffrey, this brutal, terrifying monster, and I didn't feel fear. I felt safe. For the first time in my life, the monster was on my side. Do it, I whispered.
Jeffrey heard me. His eyes flicked to mine, checking, ensuring I wasn't breaking. When he saw my nod, he turned back to Slade. The king's justice. He didn't tear his throat out. That would be too quick. Instead, he threw Slade. The man flew 20 feet through the air and slammed into a stack of shipping crates. He crumpled to the floor, broken and unmoving. He wasn't dead, but he wouldn't be walking or threatening anyone ever again. Get him out of here, Jeffrey commanded into the air. 2 men from his tactical team materialized from the shadows to collect the garbage. Jeffrey turned to us, the rage drained from his face instantly, replaced by frantic concern. He rushed to Scott, who was still tied to the chair, staring at Jeffrey with open-mouthed awe. Is he hurt? Jeffrey asked me, his large hands hovering over Scott, but not touching, afraid to scare the boy. Did they break anything? Just bruises, I said, my voice trembling now that the adrenaline had faded. I finished untying the ropes. Scott fell forward. Jeffrey caught him. I've got you, son, Jeffrey murmured, his voice gentle, the same voice he used to soothe me from nightmares. Easy. You, Scott stammered, looking up at the blood-spattered giant holding him. You're the king. You're the Wolf King. I'm Lucy's boyfriend, he corrected, effortlessly lifting Scott into his arms like a child. He looked at me. Let's go home. We walked out into the rain. The SUV was waiting. Jeffrey placed Scott in the back seat with a medic who had just arrived. Then he turned to me. He was soaked, bloody, and terrifying. He cupped my face with hands that had just broken bones. He was shaking. I almost lost you, he whispered, pressing his forehead to mine. The rain mixed with the blood on his skin. When I saw that knife, I didn't lose you, I said, gripping his wrists. You saved us. You saved everything. He kissed me then, hard, desperate, tasting of rain and iron. It was a promise. Never again, he swore against my lips. No one touches you, ever. The penthouse was quiet. Scott was asleep in the guest room, patched up and sedated. The security team was stationed downstairs. The world outside was still spinning, but inside the sky citadel, time had stopped. I stood by the fireplace. The flames danced, casting long shadows across the room. Jeffrey walked in. He had showered, scrubbing away the blood and the grime of the shipyard. He wore loose sweatpants and nothing else. His chest was a landscape of muscle and old scars, his skin glowing in the firelight. He held a piece of paper in his hand, the ledger, the debt note. He didn't speak. He walked to the fireplace and held the paper out. We both watched as the flames licked the edge, curling the paper, turning the red ink into black ash. $5 million, gone in smoke. It is done, he said, his voice deep and final. The debt is paid. Slade is gone. Your brother is safe. He turned to me. He didn't come closer. He stood 5 feet away, his hands at his sides.
You are free, Lucy.
The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Free? I repeated. You don't owe me anything, he said, though his eyes were screaming with pain. You can leave. I will set up a trust for Scott. You can go to art school. You can have the life you wanted before your father ruined it. He was letting me go. The alpha who was obsessed with control, who had claimed me as his own, was opening the cage door because he loved me enough to let me choose. I looked at the door. Then I looked at him. I walked the 5 feet between us. I don't want the life I had before, I said softly. I reached out and placed my hand on his chest, feeling the thunderous beat of his heart. I want this life. I want the safety. I want the fire. I looked up into his golden eyes. I want the king. Jeffrey shuddered, his control snapping. He grabbed my waist, pulling me so hard against him that the air left my lungs. Are you sure? He growled, baring his teeth. Because if you stay now, I will never let you go. You will be mine in every way a woman can be. Body, soul, and blood. I know, I whispered. I tilted my head to the side, sweeping my hair away from my neck. I exposed the sensitive skin over my mating gland. Mark me, Jeffrey. The request broke him. He roared, a sound of pure triumph, and lifted me, pinning me against the wall. His mouth crashed onto mine, devouring me. There was no patience left, no slow burn. This was an inferno. He tore the robe from my shoulders. His hands were everywhere, possessive, demanding, worshipping. Mine, he chanted against my skin. Mine, mine, mine. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling my scent, his teeth grazing the pulse point. Do it, I begged, arching into him. Claim me. He bit down. Pain and pleasure exploded in a white-hot starburst. I screamed his name as his fangs sank into my claiming spot, binding his soul to mine forever. The bond snapped into place, a flood of his emotions pouring into me. Overwhelming love, fierce protection, absolute adoration. I felt him shudder as he drank my essence, marking me as the alpha queen. He pulled back, licking the wound to seal it. His eyes were no longer just gold, they were galaxies. You are my heart, he whispered, resting his forehead against mine. My queen, my wife. I smiled, tracing the blood on his lip. And you, I whispered back, are my king. He picked me up and carried me to the bedroom, not as a debt to be paid, but as a treasure to be worshipped. The cage was gone. We were just 2 wolves, finally home. The end.